right. Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Map Round Show. This is the Built in California series where I'm shining a light on some cool founders doing amazing things in the world of business. AJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's great to be here.
So you're doing some incredible things at Blossom. Blossom.team is the website for everybody if you are interested. But AJ, why don't you give us the elevator pitch? What's your background? Let's start with that, and then we'll get into the main meal of Blossom.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So my background is actually in the professional development, leadership development space. I started out really passionate about this space more from an academic perspective. So I focused on labor studies in my undergrad, just really fell in love with this meta idea of work, this thing where we just dedicate so much of our life to work. It's a core part of our identity. It's the first thing, you chat about with someone that you just met. And in an interesting way, we're all a little bit unsatisfied with it. So I continued my studies. I went to grad school, did my master's in HR with a focus on IO psychology. And all my research was really focused about leadership development and team effectiveness. Um, I ended up pivoting into management consulting. So I spent about 5.5 years at McKinsey and Company as a consultant. And then really kind of towards the end of that, when I was promoted to an engagement manager and took on this leadership position, that was my first time working with an executive coach myself, which is a part of that professional development journey at McKinsey. And I absolutely loved it. It reminded me of all the work and the research that I had been doing. And it was just so effective for me at a personal level, transitioning from an individual contributor to a team leader. And unfortunately, the kind of McKinsey sponsored period of time ended. And I had this decision of, okay, do I continue working with this coach? It's been so monumentally impactful for my career. And I saw the price tag. It was like 650 an hour to keep going. I was like, okay, maybe not. And I realized there's something fundamentally wrong there, right? This intervention, this opportunity of working with a coach is so powerful and so amazing, yet it's completely inaccessible to the majority of working professionals. CEOs and C-suite execs are constantly working with coaches. It's always accessible to them, but for anyone else, really, it's this really inaccessible thing. Um, I met my co-founder kind of going through a similar experience. We met at a holiday party, and we got to talking of all things HR tech and coaching and professional development. We quickly realized there's a big problem out there that needed to be solved, and this was at the kind of beginning of the pandemic, right? When this is top of mind for everyone, the dissatisfaction with work. So we got to collaborating, started experimenting, testing things, dusting off all of this research in the space from the last, 7 years, and saw that there were just so many breakthroughs untouched by technology, with a big opportunity to make a difference. So that's kind of how we got to work.
So, what is the problem that you guys actually solve? Is this about career development? Is it about finding, attracting, and sourcing talent? Like, where does the rubber hit the road for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with like the main problem, right? So the main problem is we spend over 33% of our lives working, and over 85% of us are deeply unhappy with that, right? So that's a huge problem. Now, within that, there are a lot of different reasons. The number one reason people are dissatisfied, the number one reason people actually quit, is because of a lack of career growth and development. That's kind of the number one thing people are really struggling with these days. Um, there's a myriad of other problems and other things kind of contributing to people's dissatisfaction, like, having a bad boss, conflict at work, burnout, stress. There's a lot, and coaching kind of addresses all of those things head on. So that's kind of, I guess, the short version, right? I didn't really give an elevator pitch, but Blossom is a digital coaching platform that's backed by all of these breakthroughs in multiple fields of science that contribute to, the most effective form of coaching. And we bring all of that together with analytics that actually let you measure your progress over time. So we're solving problems for the individuals on Blossom, working with their coach, as well as at a more kind of meta level, the people leaders. So whether it's a chief people officer or a founder, that really want a solution for talent development, employee experience, and kind of growth and professional development for their organization at large.
So one of the big trends that, or buzz terms, is like quiet quitting. But obviously my view is like quiet quitting is going to get you fired if you're kind of on that train. You're at the coalface of all this whole kind of culture, career development trend. How important is quiet quitting something that you see happening on a daily basis? And if it is, how do we change that narrative?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, you know, my personal opinion and what we've seen, um, even before this buzzword really took the spotlight, is quiet quitting has been around. The pandemic really put a spotlight on employee experience and employee engagement and disengagement. But the phenomenon of quiet quitting has been around for a very long time, right? Even before there was that buzzword, people were frustrated, people were fed up at work. Um, Pre-pandemic, before even burnout was really top of mind for folks, burnout was recognized by the World Health Organization as an actual ailment affecting people. So people have been stressed, people have been unhappy, people have been quiet quitting even before the brand name popped up. And it's a really big problem. And it's not just a problem for organizations, it's a problem for the people that have to, go through that experience. People who are quiet quitting, they're not doing it, because it's fun and it's great. They're kind of at their wits' end. Um, so we're kind of in a position now where we have a lot of shared incentives. Organizations don't want people to be quiet quitting. People don't want to find themselves in a situation where they are feeling like they're quiet quitting or have to be quiet quitting. So no one's really winning. So I think everyone has a pretty shared incentive to address this problem.
I've got your website up for everybody. I'm on your for business page. Is the problem for businesses attrition? You're saying apparently you guys reduce attrition by up to 86%. Is that the kind of incentive for businesses from your perspective?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Retention is super top of mind now more than ever for any organization. Even though in the past few months there have been layoffs and different sorts of economic pressure affecting folks, at the end of the day, the workforces that remain are a massive flight risk. So this idea of the great resignation is still really top of mind for people leaders everywhere. So the need to retain employees is very top of mind. Now, the interesting thing is when folks have thought about retention historically, it's been very unsystematic and unscientific how you address it. So, you know, people leaders, HR folks, they're kind of always trying to figure out the right balance between perks and development opportunities, just kind of guessing what will work to keep people happy, whether it's, ping pong table, free yoga membership, versus giving people what they need in terms of development and step up opportunities. And the really great thing about Blossom and why it's been so effective in retention is that now people don't have to choose. You don't have to choose between a perk versus a development opportunity. When you're investing in coaching, you're doing both. You're giving a perk to your employees that also has the ROI in terms of growing them, developing their skills, improving their engagement, their stress level, their burnout. So it's a really fantastic kind of best of both worlds approach that's turned out to be really effective.
So let's unpack the how here. Are you connecting coaches to people in the workforce? Like, is that what Blossom is fundamentally doing?
Yes, that's exactly right. So we look at a ton of different variables on the individual side, on the coach side, and we facilitate a match between those people. So at a fundamental level, That's exactly right. We're connecting individuals and perfectly matched coaches. And that's all within our platform with a variety of exercises, content, and other features to not only make sure that that match is fantastic, but that that person is getting the resources they need throughout that coaching engagement. Um,
So
yeah,
how,
just to add,
yeah, go ahead.
one more piece as well. If you think about coaching pre-Blossom, it's been around for a while, right? CEOs, execs working with coaches. The part that's always been missing has been being able to really measure and quantify the impact of coaching. So with the Blossom platform, not only are you facilitating that match between an individual and a coach, you're getting the analytics and evidence of growth throughout that journey.
hmm So let's talk about the matching process, because that's got to be where your secret sauce is, right? Because
Definitely.
if you if you match me to a B grade coach, like it's game over. You know what I mean? Like it's a pretty terrible user or customer experience, if you like. So how does the matching process actually work? So as an example, let's say that I'm a salesperson, right? So my career development is to become more capable or competent at rejection handling or objection handling, or whatever the case might be, or just to be the number one salesperson in my business. And I think this is a good point to talk about the difference between career development goals and skills, because they're different things. And then, because they're different things, like how do you match someone against those two different use cases, if you like?
Absolutely. So step one is the baseline and personalization aspect of it, right? So if you're Matt, you're joining, you're a salesperson, you have, this idea in your head of where you want to improve. That's great, right? Some people don't. Some people are kind of in more of an exploratory phase. So we have a baseline assessment that looks at 10 different dimensions of career development, professional development, between productivity, communication and presence, interpersonal skills, conflict management. We go through a series of questions that kind of ask you to reflect on a few of these things, and then you get your results. So for someone like you who's really keen on, being the number one salesperson, productivity is probably super top of mind. Your baseline will probably reflect that. Um, you still have the choice to choose a different topic. Maybe your goal is a little bit different than, let's say, productivity enhancement. But if those do line up, that's great. You select that. A lot of stuff is going to be happening in the background for this, as you said, the secret sauce of our matching algorithm. So we already know quite a bit about you after you went through our onboarding, your functional expertise in sales, what level you are. Let's say you're a highly experienced individual contributor. We know about your industry. We know all these different data points on your side of things, and now the topic of focus. As that's happening, we're kind of curating a list of coaches that are going to be the best match for you. So looking at industry, looking at function, looking at the expertise of coaches, whether it's a communications coach, a productivity coach, etc. Uh, and all of that's happening in the background. What you see is three recommended best match coaches. You'll look through their profiles, get a bit of a feel about their interpersonal kind of that chemistry, the fit, which is really important for a match, obviously, and you'll choose one of those three. So in short, it's really a large set of variables about you as the user, an equivalent set of variables about the coach, and then a little bit of your preference and that qualitative assessment when you actually select one of them. We're constantly iterating and working on that matching algorithm because, to your point, it's incredibly important. And we have an over 98% first match success rate, which is really phenomenal.
hmm So are you using, like, from a technology perspective, are you using things like AI and ML to do that match? Like, how are you creating such a high accuracy of matching?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what we do on a regular basis is look at different traits and variables that haven't necessarily been a core part of the matching algorithm, where we see strong correlation of match success. And then in the next iteration of our matching algorithm, we kind of bring those variables in. So it's constantly improving, it's constantly learning. And we, obviously we're incredibly science-backed and analytics-driven in everything we do from a product perspective. It's no different for our matching algorithm. So the constant iterations and machine learning element of it is really key to its success.
So on your website, you talk about tools, so access tools in a community you can't find anywhere else. What are some of these tools that customers of Blossom get access to, and what are some of the outcomes that these tools realize for your customers?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So tools broadly refer to exercises and content in the Blossom platform that you will have access to depending on your area of focus and where you are in that journey. I already mentioned one of them, which is that default baseline. Another one that's very common and very popular is the daily reflection. So there's just been an absolute tsunami of science about the importance of mindfulness and self-reflection to growth and learning. Um, it's almost become like pop culture knowledge or just cliche at this point, but the research is really interesting if you look at why. Um, the number one reason is it improves your self-awareness. So imagine, Matt, at the end of every day, you're kind of reflecting on how your day was, whether it was good or bad. Let's stick with the productivity example, how productive you were. Um, what led to that? What did you learn from that? What are you going to do differently tomorrow? That little 2-minute habit of those daily reflections has been proven within 10 days to boost your productivity by over 25%. And if you look at the science, it's really interesting why that is. Our brains are kind of wired to learn and retain more memory um, through learning via reflection. It uses a very different part of our brain. If you think from an education perspective, they've really adopted this. So think about like the last educational seminar you were in or kind of group workshop, something like that. It always ends with this kind of, okay, now everyone go around the room and say, what are the three biggest highlights from this discussion? Or what's my takeaway for tomorrow? The reason that everyone does that is because it's proven to work. When you actually kind of think back on what you just learned and how you're going to apply it, you retain that to memory and it leads to new actions. So daily reflections is one really, really important tool that's really popular amongst coaches and users across different topics. Another one, oh, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Yeah, another example, let me give you one that's a little bit more topic specific. So sticking with this idea of career development, something that's very common to do early on in a coaching exercise engagement is a values exercise. So this is looking across a series of core values and ranking what's important to you. Now, this is personal. There's no right answer, right? For me, my core values are around adventure, creativity, and humor. So when you go through an exercise like that, it really surfaces what's important to you and how it shows up in work on a daily basis. So from a career development and career exploration perspective, knowing about these subconscious values that have been kind of guiding decisions you take across your career or workday is very illuminating, and a coach will kind of use that to help guide how you're going to get from where you are today to your kind of goal end state.
So it's kind of like a values elicitation. So figuring out like really what kind of matters to you on an individual level, and then marrying that and those insights against a coach that can help you achieve those sorts of outcomes.
Right. That's right.
So this is an evidence-based coaching program essentially for career development orientated individuals.
Absolutely. Evidence-based coaching is just such a fantastic set of research-backed, interventions proven to work. So if you think about something more like life coaching, for example, there are some phenomenal life coaches, and I don't want to disparage life coaching by any means, but at the end of the day, if you go work with a life coach, you're not really sure what you're going to get in terms of what they're going to, quote, prescribe to you, what they're going to recommend. With a Blossom executive coach, it's completely different. Everything that your coach is going to recommend to you is going to be based off of decades of science, expertise, and kind of functional relevance to you. One good example of this that's kind of contrary to popular belief is think about the MBTI. Have you taken an MBTI assessment?
What the hell is an MBTI assessment?
It's you know, like those four letter kind of personality categories. Like I'm an ENFP in MBTI speak, and these are really common in corporate programs. You kind of do this MBTI program. You see if you're introverted or extroverted, if
Okay.
you're more of a thinker or a feeler. So this has been debunked by science, you know, a long time ago as just not being a valid instrument. Yet a lot of folks still use it and get exposed to it. The tool that has been validated by science is the five-factor model, the Big Five. So as just one, you know, small example, a Blossom coach is never going to point you towards some MBTI related exercise when it comes to that more personality diagnostic type of instrument. They're going to go with the five-factor model. And that's across the board with anything that happens on Blossom, always evidence-based and science-backed.
So Myers-Briggs is the thing.
That's
Yep.
right.
So yeah, no, I know about that.
Okay. Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Yeah, that's the abbreviation, MBTI.
Uh-huh. So that's really what kind of, from what I'm hearing, AJ, that's what kind of makes you guys different. It's really understanding the science behind leadership and matching the science to a human. So it's almost like the marriage. What I'm hearing is it's like the marriage between humans, a coach, the career person, the employee, and then AI and science and data to create career development goals for businesses or for individuals within those businesses, so that as a consequence it reduces attrition.
That's
Right?
exactly right. Yeah. And to take that one step further, those same, you know, scientific exercises, features, and the analytics to measure your progress that exist at an individual level, we replicate that from a leadership perspective. So if you're the chief people officer at one of the organizations where, you know, Blossom is there for your people, you have a view, we call it the CPO, the people analytics dashboard. So you can see at an organizational level, how is your employee experience trending? You know, what are these topics that your people really are focusing on? One example of how that's been super impactful for one of our customers has been we surfaced a really interesting trend around conflict management being the most important to the sales team at one of our customers. And what they did with that information was instead of kind of on this periodic basis dedicating millions of dollars to random talent development initiatives or access to LinkedIn Learning, they decided to dedicate a little bit of that to a conflict management group exercise for that team. They went through one of our recommended exercises, the conflict management five types model. And it was incredibly impactful. And they saw the employee experience go up for the quarter that followed. So this data isn't just helpful at an individual level, it also really moves the needle at a company-wide level.
So what are you hoping to create here? I mean, as an outcome, like what do you see the vision being as in, you know, in 5 years time for Blossom? Is it like a happier workplace? Is it, you know, better workforce retention? Is it none of those things?
I
Yeah.
think it's all of those things, and they go hand in hand, right? So a happier workforce, it instead of having 85% of people feeling miserable at work, I want that number to go way down. So our mission is about addressing that problem and making sure that everyone feels satisfied, fulfilled, respected, valued, able to grow at work, right? Um, like I said earlier, we just spend way too much of our life working for it to be this tedious, horrible experience where you wake up kind of miserable every morning. So we want that to change. And as a result of that, your attrition goes down, your retention goes up, satisfaction goes up, productivity goes up, right? So this two-part mission really is intimately linked, right?
Hmm. So I've often found, like, in between founding like 14 startups over the last 25 years, don't recommend that for anyone. One's enough, dude. But like when I have been working at like, I spent a lot of time at Accenture, interestingly enough, and I think like your background with McKinsey is similar in the sense of, like, I think they're actually quite good at doing career development. There's proper policies and systems and processes and things in place in a consulting environment, because their entire business is people. And I think in a entrepreneur's environment, or in a smaller business, like let's just say you have like 250 employees or what have you, or maybe 100 or 50, the smaller the business, the less recognition there is on the importance of this, of what this problem is around. In other words, if I speak to, like, let's just say 10 startup, or I speak to founders every day, if I take the last 10 that I spoke to as an example, and I said to them, do you have a talent strategy? I reckon probably 10 of them would say no. It's
Absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's an afterthought rather than
Right.
something that's part of your strategy. Because I think you and I know that, like, people are a business is literally just people working together, right, to achieve a vision or an outcome
Right.
or what have you, or change the world in a certain way. But if you take all the people out the business, you got no business,
Right.
right? It's a truism. Why is that the case, though? Why is this such seen as such an afterthought? I mean, if we know that if you have two businesses selling the same thing to the same people or the same customers, let's just say, and business A has a better team in the engine room, right? Then they will most likely win out at the end of the day. So if we know this to be the case, why
Yeah.
don't we think about this as being a strategic enabler? It's almost like HR is kind of like, oh, it's where you hire and fire people. But when you
Right.
get into HR, it's complex. There's compensation. There's like I did a project, funnily enough, at Accenture, where I was leading a team of executives for a company that was merging across 4 continents. And in the room, there was over 120 years of compensation benefits experience
Wow.
across 4 people.
Mm.
It's super complex, right?
Yeah.
And so what we were doing was helping them figure out, well, what does the future of compensation benefits look like
Right.
across 100,000 employees. It's a strategic enabler, right? It's
Right.
not like, because if you don't get that right, like, the consequences, you lose people and you
That's
lose
exactly right.
performance. So anyway, I'm overbaking it, but why is this the case? Why don't we see it, talent as being a strategic enabler? And if it,
Yeah.
and because we need this in our businesses to grow, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so I love this question. I could nerd out with you on this for like hours. Um, so it, before I answer the question, I just want to say that's absolutely right. So our recent research has shown the first HR hires, the first people hires, often doesn't happen till Series B. That's usually when you bring in your first talent person, which is absolutely mind-boggling given how important it is, as you just underscored. Interestingly, I did my thesis research when I was doing my master's on the evolution of the people or HR function in startups. And the research is so clear that the earlier startups start investing in people as a function, as a source of competitive advantage, the higher their performance is over time. The companies that don't, the lower their performance, many of them fold. So it's one of the most highly correlated indicators of success, and yet not many startups are doing it. And before we kind of, give founders a tough time, it's really hard being a founder, as I'm sure you know from from all those startups. It's really hard. We have so many competing priorities. We're just trying to keep the lights on, make sure we don't run out of money, grow. And what happens is we end up not focusing on enablers until it's too late. So you don't invest in kind of the proper hiring approach and legal approach to hiring until you get hit with a fine of some kind, or your lawyer or accountant tells you, hey, you actually have to do this before 30 days have passed of hiring a new individual. So these urgent things happen. They catch us off guard. Somebody quits because they're not kind of getting what they need from a developmental perspective. And then we start thinking about it, and it's just the wrong way. Um, in addition to it being really hard, there's also no solution out there, right? where do you go as a founder who doesn't have enough time to think about these types of things for a one-stop solution to people development for your startup? The answer is nowhere unless you know about us, right? So we're trying to fit that spot. We're trying to fill that vacuum, and be the place where founders can find an easy, straightforward, affordable, and scalable solution to people development at their company. We have a self-onboarding flow that we're developing now based on all the different founders that we work with. And because we've seen so much success with startups, we're really doubling down there, because there's such a massive need. It makes such a big difference in performance. And to your point, it's being really grossly underutilized. So there's a huge opportunity there, and we're really excited to be serving it.
Well, the other thing to say is that founders don't have time.
They
Like
don't.
who's gonna? I'm not thinking about that.
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out like what nail to hit or
right,
how to build a better product, or maybe I think it's at seed stage especially. I think it's like I'm interested in funding and product.
right. Absolutely.
And some talent, because I can't build the thing without without an engineer.
Right,
But I'm thinking quite. I'm pigeoned in my thinking, right?
right,
In the sense of like I'm not thinking how to keep them
right,
or how to get the best out of them. You know what I
right.
mean? Or how to
Until it's too late.
until it's too late. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of
that's
startups that engineers can go to, to build stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why it's so interesting that the stat I shared about the people team development, it's very different for second time founders. So we do eventually learn, right? When these mistakes happen, when people leave, when you lose the folks that you spent so much time and money hiring. So the second time around, you kind of learn your lesson a little bit and focus a little bit earlier on in the process. So that's been very interesting to see. There's one other way I think our thinking as founders is a little bit pigeonholed, and that's from working with a coach ourselves. So interestingly, I saw a stat that the post Series A founders, actually over 40% of these folks work with an executive coach themselves. So imagine, you're a founder, you're working with an executive coach, you're paying that, $1,000 per hour rate. The last thing you're thinking of is, wow, this is so fantastic. I'm going to get this for my whole. It's impossible. It's completely unscalable. So that unlock, that shift in thinking to see that this really is feasible and accessible for me to roll out to my whole company, and for me to track all these metrics that I, previously hadn't been able to see at all, has been a huge unlock for founders, and that's why we're seeing so much traction with startups.
What do you say to a founder who's like, yeah, I've got a coach already? You know what I mean? Or like even just an individual? Because I think there's, I was talking to Matt Savrick recently. He's a coach based out in Florida, and he charges like six figures. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
To coach.
right,
So like there's him and other coaches who charge a lot of money because of the value that they create. And then, like you mentioned, life coaching. So like if you say to me, Matt, here's Greg. Greg's a life coach. I'm like, no, dude.
yeah,
You know
right,
what I mean? Like I'm not interested in a life coach. I'll coach myself.
right,
But context here, if I'm a founder and you say to me, here's a mastermind group, which essentially is like a peer-driven coaching session, right? Where you
right.
get perspective and all that kind of stuff. Like that's interesting to me. Why is there such a stigma around coaching in general?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'll say is founders need support. And I don't think you have to make a choice between where you get your support. If you're a founder, you have a life coach that you have found success working with. You have a mastermind where you get those, peer perspectives, and it's really fantastic for you. And you have your executive coach, where, it's been massive for you in your evolution as a leader. Then that's great. Kudos to you for kind of getting yourself the support you need. All too often, I think you see the opposite of that, which is suffering in silence, not having any resources whatsoever. So if somebody has multiple sources of support, that's great for them. I mean, speaking personally, I have a health coach that I work with. I have my executive coach. My co-founder and I both work with a kind of co-founder group style coaching approach. So the more, the merrier. the experience that I've seen so far with the founders that we work with, a few of them actually have started out not working with the Blossom coach. They've actually rolled it out to their team, and then over time started working with different specialist Blossom coaches. So kind of going on a really topic specific basis. So working with a coach dedicated and really specialized in communications and presence. As the company's growing, you're giving more of these town hall meetings. You really want to focus in on that specific skill, and that's usually how they first get their experience with a Blossom coach, and then eventually kind of make the switch. Some folks don't, and that's okay. Blossom is all about flexibility. So if you're super happy with your 6 figures a year coach that and you think it has that ROI, it's creating the value, it's worth it, then that's great. You can configure the Blossom cohort as you see fit. So you kind of say, here are the teams that I have. I want everyone in the company to work with a coach. Cool. I want just my managers, VPs, and up to be working with a coach. Also totally fine. For bigger corporates, we do a lot of high potentials programs. So that'll be like this identified group of emerging talent or next generation leaders in the company. So it's totally customizable. And really, there's no constraint when it comes to defining your cohort for Blossom.
So AJ, I think what you've done is relevant. The timing is so important right now. There's a lot of talk about millennials, Gen Zs, quiet quitting, attrition, this kind of stuff, getting the right people into the business. And I also think that what you've done is really, really hard to do. So I want to have a bit of fun here. So if I gave you the keys to the Matt Brown Show time machine and I said, cool, go back to day one, right? Or even when you were in McKinsey, and you could give yourself a piece of advice about growing this startup or building this startup, what would that advice be?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think I would tell myself to just forget everything I thought I knew about being an entrepreneur, about being a founder, and just start from square one from a learning perspective. I think so many founders have this dream of, founding a startup, what it means to be a founder, what it means to be an entrepreneur, um, and this kind of like approach to a startup in their head. And I think forgetting all of that and starting with a completely open slate is the way to go. So early on in the Blossom journey, before Blossom was even Blossom, um, the problem we were solving never changed, right? Like the dissatisfaction, burnout, quiet quitting, as it's now called. But the first at bat that we took of solving it, we didn't do it in terms of like listening to users, doing a lot of research, iterating quickly. We did the exact opposite of that, which is building in a vacuum. We thought we'd build it and they'll come, right? So I think it was incredibly valuable from a learning perspective. Everything we did completely changed after that, those first few months of building and testing. So it was a really valuable learning experience. But if I could go back in time, I'd say, hey, maybe just join YC Startup School, watch a couple videos, and you'll kind of avoid some of those early on mistakes. So yeah, I think that might be it. But at the same time, I'd be tempted to say, here are the keys. It was a good learning opportunity, so we'll stick with what happened.
So just to be clear here, what is your point of view? If you build it, will they come, yes or no?
No, they won't. You have to build with them, and you have to bring them along as you're building. And it's kind of a partnership that never ends. I mean, even till this day, like I said, the kind of analytics driven approach that we have for our product isn't just for our users, it's us internally. That's how we operate. So whether that's iterations and improvements to how we do matching, to any other aspect of the product, it's what our users are telling us they want, what our coaches are telling us they want for the coach experience. So everything is a collaborative, kind of open door, user led approach to product development. And I think that's just a basic fundamental part of the startup journey that you have to learn very early on.
Hmm. And AJ, how do you elicit feedback from users in such a way that it's insightful? Because I think there's feedback, right? And like this is lots of feedback, but how do you evaluate that feedback so that you take action on the right things at the right time, not the wrong things at the right time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's lots of different types of feedback. There's direct or explicit feedback, which to your point can be subject to some biases or incorrect data. And then there's just data, right? There's truth in feed. Like if somebody joins um, a new product and they churn 4 days later after some feature was pushed to them, that's not necessarily verbal feedback, but that's feedback. That's data telling you a very clear story and a very clear takeaway. So on the first type of feedback around conversations and research, um, you have to be very thoughtful in both the user interview types of approach, the mom test. There's a ton of UX literature about how you run these interviews successfully in an open way with a listening ear. Um, and there are tons of benchmarks and examples and guidance when it comes to crafting the right surveys, etc. So that I think is a very like solvable problem. You just have to read and be open to learning and doing things differently. Mom test is a great place to start. When it comes to data-driven feedback, there's a lot of different tools that we use. Um, we do a lot of A/B testing and experimenting. We're kind of building out our growth and retention stack as we speak to get even deeper analytics. Um, we're yeah, uh, one thing top of mind is we're launching our mobile app October 15th, our new iOS app, and we've done a complete kind of redesign of the journey based on both types of user feedback, and we're going to be very closely monitoring how that journey looks in the first few weeks post-launch, and we'll kind of be iterating from there. So lots of data and lots of listening, I think, is key.
Can we spend a minute or two on this mom tests thing? I haven't heard it, but now I found the book,
Yeah.
the mom test: how to talk to customers and learn if your business is a good idea when everyone is lying to you. And that's actually a truism, right? Because I think no one will tell you you suck to your face. Do you need this? Yes, I do. Um, you know what I mean? So, what is the mom test? Like, how are you applying? Well, what is it, and how are you applying it in your business?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really the title is a really big part of it, right? People lie to you, and it's not a malicious lie. It's not, people are trying to deceive you. It's just if you don't ask questions the right way in an open way, or if you ask the wrong question, you're not going to get the right answer, and you might be getting a lie. The other really important this isn't like a very clear takeaway from the book, but it's something that I thought of also from the title and the examples used. If you're getting feedback from your mom, you're getting very biased feedback. And early on, this goes a little bit to the time machine question. In some of our early builds, we were leveraging our close network for a lot of the feedback and the testing. Um, much easier said than done, but it's really important for you to get feedback from neutral third party folks. Um, that even the smallest, little desire to sugarcoat or be nice to you won't exist. You need to find people like that. And the best way to do that is to kind of solve a problem for them that they've been really struggling to solve. The early adopters are the best source of valid, unvarnished feedback because they're the folks that have such a big problem and have no real solution that they found. So finding that community, finding those people, and both speaking to them and seeing how they use your product is going to give you mom test approved insights.
Cool. Great stuff. So, AJ, let's wrap this up. One more question for you. Why do you do what you do? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Mm, that's a great question. So I think our we're very fortunate to have a mission that is real and tangible, and you can see the impact of it in real life. I think for a lot of companies, your mission or your purpose, you have to make a couple of jumps to see how it eventually like helps people, right? With Blossom, we're really fortunate because you don't have to make any jumps. You are actually seeing and hearing people's lives change for the better in a very real way. And it's just fantastic. Like from all of our stakeholders, whether it's coaches, individuals, our customers at a corporate level, it's just so fantastic to see improvement that helps everyone um, at work and it alleviates these problems that are very real and serious. Like think about burnout, for example. You were at Accenture and with all this experience founding a company, like when if you've ever experienced burnout, you know how massive it is to alleviate some of that. I know that personally, right? Even with my own coach, when I was working through things like burnout and imposter syndrome, it was night and day after each session, after um, the full engagement that I had. So seeing that level of impact happen at scale is incredibly motivating, and makes the whole journey really worth it.
Mm-hmm. AJ, love what you're doing. I dig you as a dude. I think you're doing rad stuff, and I can
Likewise. Thanks, Matt.
I can clearly see you're motivated to make the world a better place, which is why I do this show and why you're building what you're building. So very excited to see where you're going to go over the next few years. I know you've got aggressive growth targets, so I'm pretty sure you're going to get there. So thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really, really appreciate it, and the feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime, buddy. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Ciao, ciao.
Alrighty. Thank